Prynhawn da i chi gyd. Gobeithio eich bod yn cadw'n dda, a diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am ymuno gyda ni ar gyfer ein webinar i'ch cefnogi i baratoi i gyflwyno'r cymhwyster adeiladu a pheiriannau gwasanaethau adeiladu Level 3. Good afternoon to you all. Hope you're all keeping well, and thank you very much for joining us for our webinar today to prepare to deliver the Construction and Building Services Level 3 qualification webinar. Rydym dal yn gweithio adre, felly ymddeiriadau ymlaen llaw am unrhyw sŵn yn y cefndir ac unrhyw oedi yn y sleidiau. We are all still working from home, therefore I apologise in advance for any background noise and any delay in the slides. Fe fyddwch yn derbyn copi o'r pwynt pŵer ar ôl y webinar. Fe gallwch ddod o hyd i bob recordiad o gwebinarau blaenorol ar ein gwefan Sgiliau i Gymru. Gallwch hefyd gofrestru ar gyfer ein gwebinarau sydd i ddod. Mae dau gyda ni dydd Gwener yma ar gyfer paratoi ar gyfer cymwysterau sylfaen a dilyniant, ac hefyd nifer o webinarau ar gyfer y gwahanol feysydd yn Level 3. You will receive a copy of the PowerPoint after this webinar. You can access the recordings to all previous webinars on our Skills for Wales website. You can also register on our upcoming webinars. We have 2 webinars this Friday to support the delivery of the Foundation and Progression qualifications, along with a number of trade-specific webinars for Level 3 held in the next few weeks. Fe fyddwch yn derbyn e-bost cyn diwedd y webinar gyda linc i'n harolwg. Byddem yn ddiolchgar iawn petai chi'n cymryd yr amser i lenwi ein harolwg, gan bod eich adborth yn werthfawr iawn i ni. You will receive an email before the session ends with a link to a survey. We would be very grateful if you would take the time to fill in this survey, as your feedback is very valuable to us. Dyma beth oeddwn ni'n trafod heddiw. Fyddwn yn edrych pa mae'r trawsnewid yma wedi digwydd o fewn y cymwysterau yma. Yna fe fyddwn yn edrych ar gynnwys y cymhwyster Level 3, gan edrych ar strwythur yr unedau a chrynodeb o'r asesiad. Fe fyddwn yn edrych ar canllaw cadarnhad y cyflogwr, ac hefyd ar adnoddau dysgu sydd ar gael i chi, cyn symud ymlaen at y camau nesaf. Ac ar y diwedd, fe fydd yna gyfle i chi ofyn unrhyw gwestiynau i ni. Plis manteisiwch ar y cyfle yma gan rhoi eich gwestiynau yn y tab cwestiynau sydd ar y llaw dde o'ch sgrin yn ystod y cyflwyniad. Fe fydd y cyflwyniad yn para tua 45 munud, gan rhoi digon o amser chi gael y cyfle i ofyn cwestiynau i'n penelwyr. This is what we'll be discussing. We will look at why the transformation has happened. We will then look at the Level 3 qualification content and the structure of the units, and also the summary of the assessments. We will then take a look at the employer confirmation guide, and then we will show you the learning resources that are available for you. And then we will discuss the next steps for you. At the end, there will be an opportunity for you to ask us any questions. Please type in any questions you may have in the Questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen during the presentation. The presentation will last around 45 minutes, allowing plenty of time for you to ask us any questions. Felly dyma i chi pwy sydd yn gwneud pwy fydd gyda ni heddi yn rhoi cyflwynadau. Here who's given you let me just give you an introduction to who our presenters are today. We have David Pye, who's the Technical Advisor for Building Services at City and Guilds. Also have Ian Roberts, who's the Technical Advisor for Construction at City and Guilds. We have Kevin Sparrow, who's the Electrical Product Specialist at EAL. Jason Howe, who's the Technical Advisor for Construction at City and Guilds. And myself, Angharad Lloyd-Bainan, who's the Policy, Stakeholder and Partnerships Manager for the Nations. Felly gewn ni edrych am pam mae'r trawsnewid ma 'di digwydd. Let's have a look then why this transformation has happened. In February 2018, Qualifications Wales published the Building the Future report, which was a sector review of qualifications and the qualification system in construction and the built environment in Wales. The report summarised the views of learning providers and a range of professional and representative bodies, together with more than 100 employers and over 900 learners. It includes findings from their own review of a sample of qualifications and an international comparison study. Qualifications Wales has outlined findings with that inconsistent assessment practices, and that assessment was often not very well managed and quality assurance inconsistent, some areas of learning not effectively assessed. They found a need that the learners to be able to deal with a range of tasks and to be able to problem solve. We have incorporated these into our new qualifications with aspects such as planning and evaluation skills and reflective practices. And learners gain a better understanding of interactions between trades with the new suite of qualifications. Qualifications needed to meet skills needs of Wales, such as heritage buildings, traditional materials, tools and techniques, and how they have changed over time. They also found a need to rationalise the amount of over 400 technical and vocational qualifications in the construction and built environment sector, and a need for having coherence in the qualifications. City and Guilds and EL are the two awarding bodies who have come together to collaborate on the development of a suite of construction and building services engineering qualifications for Wales. The content of these new qualifications have been developed in conjunction with a number of stakeholders. On this slide, you can see how a learner can progress from a GCSE in the built environment right the way up to a level 3 apprenticeship. This slide also shows which awarding body is responsible for which qualification. The webinar today will focus on the level 3 apprenticeship in construction and building services environment, which will be going live for first teaching in September 2022. On this slide, it just shows you some questions that you may have. The level 3 qualification in construction and building service engineering learners will develop their knowledge, skills and understanding in either a construction or building services engineering trade contained in the National Occupational Standards. And learners will complete 2 core units covering their relevant sector and practice in the sector within Wales. The qualification is aimed at learners at 16 and over, currently working in construction or building services engineering industry. It's designed for learners who have either passed the level 2 foundation in construction and building services engineering qualification, or will be completing their core foundation qualification learning and assessments while in their apprenticeship. It's also for learners who have completed the level 3 progression in construction or building services engineering qualification. It's designed to be completed on a part-time basis within the apprenticeship. Before the assessments, learners must first demonstrate their performance and capability to the satisfaction of their employer. And on completion, the qualification will provide learners with the skills and knowledge required for the learner to be capable of working in their chosen trade area across the UK. Hoffwn nawr eich trosglwyddo I Kevin Sparrow a fydd yn tywys trwy y sleidau nesaf. I would now like to pass you over to Kevin Sparrow, who will take you through the next slides. Diolch, Kevin.
We seem to be having a technical issue at the moment. Kevin, are you there, please? Just bear with us 2 minutes, please. Kevin? Okay,
so Kevin was coming through earlier when we had a bit of a rehearsal, so apologies, he must have hit some problems. Just bear with us a moment, we'll try and get in contact with Kevin.
Can you hear me now, David?
Hi Kevin, we can't hear you. You're very, very faint though, so you may need to speak up or come a bit closer to the microphone.
Thank you. I do apologise to everybody. I plugged in an external microphone to increase better understanding my voice. So I'll start off on slide 8. So first of all, thanks, Anne Harrod. I'm now going to give you an overview of the qualification content and the unit structure of the new suite of level 3 construction and building services engineering qualifications. So first of all, we're going to look at the trade area.
Kevin, can you speak a bit louder, please, Kevin?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Right. I'll start again on this slide 9. So first of all, we're going to look at the trade areas offered by the consortium. So starting at the left-hand column on this slide, we have a level 2 foundation in construction and building services engineering qualification aimed at full-time learners. Also a core qualification in construction and BSE aimed at apprentices who have not yet undertaken the level 2 foundation qualification. These two qualifications between them have 8 construction-based pathways and 2 building services pathways. Sitting Guilds and EAL also have their own individual level 1 qualifications, and although not on this slide, EAL will continue to offer the level 1 diploma in electrical installation. We then have a level 2 progression qualification in construction with 9 construction trades in individual pathways, and a building services engineering progression qualification with pathways for plumbing and heating and electrotechnical systems and equipment installation.
Kevin, you're really weak. Really your sound's disappearing, I think, Kevin. Would you like us to take over?
Can you hear me now?
That's it.
That jumps up a bit, yeah.
Thank you,
Right,
Kevin.
I can just summarise this slide. I can go over it again, but in summary, this slide is essentially showing you the range of qualifications we're offering. So I think what we should do is to say, really, for apprentices at level 3, which is the subject of this webinar, we have a variety of individual trade-based qualifications, which includes 11 construction-based qualifications and 4 building services engineering qualifications. So once again, I apologise to everybody about my audio there. Can we go on to slide 10, please? So we're going to now look at the rules of combination within the new qualifications at level 3. This will be useful when thinking about delivery of the units and using resources at your centre. The different trade areas have some common or shared units, which means there is identical or very similar content across them. So this provides an economy of scale and opportunities for collaboration with colleagues across the construction building services departments at your centre, and also wider through network forums. The level 3 construction-based qualifications share 6 common core units, which we will look at on the next slide. The BSE level 3 qualifications have 7 common core units, which will be the same across the BSE trades, but they will be delivered and assessed in the trade area being taken. So in the first example, the site carpentry qualification will consist of 6 common core units and then 8 trade units as indicated as a pathway, but it will be its own qualification. The example for building services shows the plumbing and heating qualification with 7 common core units and then 14 trade units to be completed. Furthermore, if a learner has completed the level 2 progression qualification, they can RPL or RPA into the relevant apprenticeship qualification at level 3. Slide 11, please, Ian. So to illustrate further on the construction qualification at level 3, we have a Welsh-biased common core set of units covering understanding construction practices, working in the construction sector, and planning and evaluating work. Bear with me 1 second, delegates, I do apologise. It should be noted that units 301 to 303 are also identical in places and very similar to the common core building services units 301, 302 and 304. These units help provide the learner to obtain an understanding of the environments in which they will be working and also help them to plan and evaluate their work in the practical on-site project, which is one of the main assessments of the qualification. Units 304 to 306 are common across construction qualifications only and cover health and safety of welfare, productive working practices, and very importantly, moving, handling and storing resources. Slide 12, please, Ian. So looking at the number of units and guided learning hours across the construction qualifications, they will vary depending on the nature of the trade and the amount of estimated time the learner will be directly participating in learning and assessment in their trade. We have architectural joinery at 1,085 hours, and roof slating and tiling at the lower end at 634 hours. Obviously, these hours could vary depending on the type of delivery and amount of prior learning or attainment already undertaken or achieved by the learner. For example, if they had already completed a level 2 progression qualification in that trade. Next slide, please, Ian. Just to illustrate again, we have common core units within the building services level 3 qualifications, and also Welsh biased units covering understanding BSE practices, working in the sector, and planning and evaluating work. Those units 301, 302 and 304, as aforementioned, correlate to 301 to 303 in the construction qualifications. So I would recommend liaising with colleagues across the construction and BSE departments with those units and sharing best practice. We also have other common shared units for understanding health and safety, and site-based performance units covering application of health and safety and establishing, maintaining relationships and coordinating a work site. Next slide, please, Ian. Thank you. Reviewing the guided learning hours for the building services qualifications, we have electrical installation at 1,047 hours, and at the lower end of the spectrum, heating and ventilation installation at 672 hours. Again, learners who have completed the progression qualification at level 2 can RPL their progression test achievement into the level 3 apprenticeship qualification. Assessment time varies in the qualifications as the heating and ventilation and electrical trades have safety critical assessments. And in addition to this, the electrical trade has a third on-screen exam. Next slide, please, Ian. So we're now going to take a few moments to look at the presentation of the content in the new qualifications. All the qualification content is available from the handbooks or EAL qualification manuals and is available from the Skills for Wales website. The qualifications units follow national occupational standards or recognised standards for the trade. Within the units, we have divided up the content into the usual manner, consisting of learning outcomes, assessment criteria, and range. And we also provide a depth of content section which elaborates on the items to be taught. So if you are currently delivering, for example, EAL qualifications, this would be referred to as delivery advice. Next slide, please, Ian. So this is an example of the unit format. Each unit will have a unit title, the level, the guided learning hours, and a description of what the unit is about. Although not shown on this slide, we have reflective questions for the learner that can be used to introduce the topic to the students. We also include any other relevant guidance. Next slide, please, Ian. So to continue our example for this common construction unit 301, we can see the hierarchy of the content. So we have the learning outcome, understand connected practice in the construction industry, the criteria, and then the range, which provides breadth to the criteria. One key difference compared to many current qualifications is that we tend not to use active verbs such as state, explain, and describe in the criteria. This was to enable the content to be assessed in various different ways, but the depth of content section, as shown in the blue box, gives a good description to the depth that the content needs to be covered to. All the consortium's handbooks and assessment packs are available in the Welsh language for the foundation, core progression, and apprenticeship qualifications. So I do apologise again for the technical problem there, but thank you for listening, and I'm now going to pass over to Jason Howe, Technical Advisor at City and Guilds. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Good afternoon. So we're going to go through the summary of assessment slides moving forward. So if we could move on to the next one, thanks, Ian. So for the level 3 in construction and building services, it's assessed using 3 methods, and those are weighted accordingly, which will allow learners to be able to demonstrate the skills within the practical project. So we're just going to touch on each one. So first of all, we have the on-screen assessment, which is externally set and externally marked. and that has a weighting as shown on screen of 20%. Next, we have the practical project, which is probably what the learners will be more looking forward to, and that's internally set and internally marked but externally verified, and that has a solid weighting of 60%. Then we have the professional discussion. Again, that is externally set and externally marked, and that also has a weighting of 20%. So as I mentioned earlier, obviously construction learners prefer the hands-on experience, so the weightings of these assessments will allow learners to demonstrate and showcase the skills that they've been learning throughout their level 3 qualification within that practical project. We're going to go through each method of assessment in the upcoming slides, but before I move on, just to reinforce that the assessment pack detailing the requirements of the assessments and all the information that you'll need can be found on the Skills for Wales website. Assessments can be taken on demand, but obviously as centres, you must ensure that learners have undertaken all of the learning and all of the formative assessments throughout their programme, where they've been able to demonstrate their ongoing consistency of performance, showcasing their industry skills. So as shown on the screen there, for their chosen trade, the learner will have to complete the on-screen assessment. This differs slightly. So if the learner has achieved the foundation or core qualification, but not the progression, they must complete the 2 externally set and externally marked multi-choice question tests, and those are test 1 and test 2. And 1 employer set internally assessed project covering their chosen trade, and 1 externally marked professional discussion. If the learner, however, has achieved the foundation and the progression qualification, they must, the difference on this one is they would complete 1 externally set and externally marked multi-choice paper test, and that is test 2 in that version. Then, as with the other, they will complete the the 1 employer set internally assessed project covering the trade and the externally marked professional discussion as shown on screen. With the on-screen assessment, the number of multi-choice questions and timings will vary depending on which trade route that the learner is undertaking. Regarding the practical project, each pathway is made up of 4 tasks and will require the learner to plan, perform and evaluate. And this has to be taken before the professional discussion. The project will vary from trade to trade, obviously, but for example, for solid plastering, that will be conducted over approximately 70 hours, which will include all of the components as previously mentioned, the planning, the performing and the evaluation. So approximately, to add some timings to that, you've got approximately 12 hours for the planning of the tasks. 50 hours has been allocated for the completion of the practical tasks set in agreement with the employer and you guys as the learning providers, and then approximately 12 hours to complete the evaluation of the tasks. So the learners will work with the employer and the learning provider to identify, discuss and agree no more than 4 work-based tasks. The professional discussion is completed in 1 timed sitting, and that will focus on the learner reflections of the work they've been undertaking as part of that practical project and any learning which they could apply to wider contexts in their trade area. The learner will be advised that the independent assessor will record the professional discussion, obviously for assessment purposes only. And finally, for now, the professional discussion will last approximately 40 minutes. As with everything, additional information can be found within the assessment pack, which is located on the Skills for Wales website. Next slide, please, Ian. So just to summarise from myself, we'll be covering the employer confirmation in the next few slides, and as you'll see, the completion of the document provides guidance to the employers and training providers on how the occupational and competency statements have been met. This will also support the learner in applying for their relevant competencies cards. The overall qualification is graded pass, merit or distinction, and with the professional discussion, the external assessor will confirm the grade accordingly on that. The final grade will be issued by either City and Guilds for the Construction Level 3 or EAL for the BSc. Regarding submissions and resits, when a learner fails to successfully achieve a pass in any of the assessments, they are permitted to undertake a resit or resubmission. And guidance on that can be found again within the assessment packs on the Skills for Wales website. If you'd like to take a deeper dive in what we have been presenting today in line with the assessments, you can start by looking at the qualification handbook and the assessment packs again, which are located on the Skills for Wales website. Thank you very much for that. I'm now going to pass you over to my colleague Ian, who's going to take you through the next section of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, may I take this opportunity to say thank you to all stakeholders for their valuable contribution and feedback we've received, and that has helped the consortium in shaping what I'm about to present. Employee confirmation is part of the learner journey and will help strengthen the relationships between employers, centres and the learner. This is only part of the learner journey, and the process will enhance the employer role in the delivery of the new apprenticeship qualification in the construction and built environment sector. As we are aware, the learner will spend a considerable amount of their time in the realistic working environment, and the purpose of the confirmation sign-off is to capture the activities and provide stakeholders, including trade bodies, confidence that the learner is occupationally proficient and has covered the full range of the relevant standards to allow the learner to progress to the final part of their assessment process, which is the professional discussion. Although there is no NVQ within the new apprenticeship model, a learner will still provide a range of evidence that allows the centre to check the employer confirmation sign-off is valid. Upon successful completion of the robust assessment process and the confirmatory sign-off, a learner will be in a position to attain the relevant skills card. We are aware that the employer confirmation process is new and may raise a few concerns. The consortium will provide centres and employers with instructions and the requirements for completing this process, which we'll cover in the future webinars, within the employer confirmation guide, which will be further communicated at our centre and employer events, and can also be located on the Skills for Wales website. Here we can see how, working collaboratively, we can support the learner along their journey that they were required to move forward and progress to their final assessment of that robust assessment process, the professional discussion. As you can see on the slide, by working together, employers and centres will provide opportunities that will allow the learner to gain valuable industrial experience and complete the activities outlined within the employer confirmation guide that are fully mapped to the occupational competency statements set by industry. Whether it be 1, 2 or 3 employers, they will work with the learners throughout their apprenticeship. Hence the reason why we have made provision on the various forms inside for more than one employer to work on this document. Work-based learning providers and centres will work with employers to guide and support to ensure the occupational competency statement log is being completed correctly. As you can see, the pieces start to come together, and this is through working collaboratively together to ensure the learner journey runs smoothly. As you can imagine, this has been, and I should say this hasn't been, a smooth journey, as change is always and sometimes very difficult to accept. We have engaged with a considerable number of stakeholders, including micro businesses, medium to large contractors and federations, including colleges and private training providers. Within this slide, you'll see a front page content and a section that is contained within the employer confirmation guide. Like we've mentioned earlier, whether it be 1, 2 or 3 employers, they will work with the learners throughout their apprenticeship. And that's the main reasons why we have made provision throughout this document on the various forms for more than one employer to work and complete the documents. The employer confirmation guide will be trade specific and can be located on the Skills for Wales website. The document will be in a writable PDF and can be completed either electronically or hard copy. The employer confirmation is the responsibility of the employer and learner working collaboratively with the learning provider. Although this is not part of the qualification, this has to be completed prior to the learner moving forward to complete the final assessment which is the professional discussion. I would now like to pass you on to David, so thank you for now.
Thank you very much, Ian. I noticed there's a few questions come in. I've tried to answer a couple, but some of them we'll get back to at the end. So yeah, thank you very much, Ian, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have this opportunity to present to you again. So next slide, please, Ian. So our first step to access information will be the Skills for Wales website. I know that Jason and Ian and Boris have mentioned that several times throughout the presentation already, but from there you will see under the Qualifications tab a list of sectors. So click on the sector and scroll down to the bottom tab, which is titled Centre Qualification Documents, and here you will find two documents, the handbook and secondly the employer confirmatory sign-off. The handbook contains content along with various requirements for that qualification. It's always the best starting point. So often when we're introducing new qualifications, people will look at the schemes of work and some of the assessments and sample material first. We always encourage providers to have a look at the handbook first of all, because there's some really good information in there, and then start to look at some of the other information. You can find various other supporting documents on the website, which covers the qualifications all the way through from foundation to the level 3 qualifications. So please do familiarise yourselves with the website and the documents on the website. Thank you, Ian. Here we have the delivery planner. Many of you should be familiar with this form from previous webinars and from using them to support the delivery of the foundation qualification. The delivery planner is fully adaptable and equally as useful for delivering the level 3 qualifications as it is for the foundation qualification. Please allow time to consider your delivery and your timings, and if you wish to use this document, please feel free to share it with ourselves for our thoughts, and if we can have a look at those plans, we may be able to support you in that delivery. You can just talk us through it possibly. Thank you, Ian. As previously promoted, we have a suite of sector books from Hodder Education. To support this new suite of qualifications, Hodder have created free mapping documents to support staff and learners in accessing the related information for these qualifications. For more information, please contact Thomas Stotter direct. His email is on the screen now, but we can also share that in any follow-up, or we can drop it into the chat a little bit later on. Thank you, Ian. In addition to the handbook and the employer sign-off, you'll see some sample assessment materials. These are sometimes held under the Assessments tab. So again, when reviewing these documents to support planning, please become familiar with the website and the location of these important documents. They have been under the same tab as the handbooks previously, so just make sure you know where to find them. If you have any difficulty accessing some of these documents, just drop us an email and we'll support you in finding these documents. Next slide, please, Ian. Okay, look, learner journeys. As some of you are well on the way of delivering the foundation qualification, you can see from this slide the typical learner journey. Should a learner be successful in gaining employment, they may enter direct into an apprenticeship. A learner who completed the foundation wouldn't then have to also complete the core, regardless of the two trades they selected at foundation. Alternatively, should they not be successful, they may progress onto the progression qualification in their chosen trade area. Thank you, Ian. So now we'll have a look at some of the next steps. So during this update, we'll be going through the next steps and we'll commence with the centre approval journey. Here we can see the centre approval actually commenced in January 21, with the foundation and progression, and now closely followed by the level 3 qualification. Provided you haven't already gained centre approval, the following slides will help provide a broad overview of the approval journey for centres. As we are aware, these are brand new qualifications and an offline application has to be completed. If not already done so, this is available in the Become a Centre section of the Skills for Wales website, and this is for all qualifications for both awarding organisations. Centres only need to complete one application. On completion, it should be forwarded to skillsforwales.quality@sittingheels.com. This section also contains centre FAQs around approval. So, when your application has been submitted, the application will be reviewed by both EL and Sitting Heels quality teams. If there are any incomplete sections or some of the detail isn't clear, we'll ask the centre for this detail before progressing it. Separate approvals must be submitted for sub-centres. The consortium will then allocate an EQA to complete either a remote or face-to-face approval activity. Centres should adapt what they have, for example, the activity planners, sampling plans, etc. You don't need to create brand new documents. An EQA completes an approval report outlining recommendations for approval. What was reviewed, the staff that they spoke to, qualification requirements, etc. The EQA submits the report then to skillsforwales.quality@sittingheels.com or skillsforwales.quality@eal.org.uk, who will then share the report with the centre. There is complete transparency between the awarding organisations. The quality team will provide the approval decision in writing via email. Thank you, Ian. Here we can see future training and events we are holding. These are brand new qualifications and we recommend you take the time to register onto one of these events, and especially the CPD events we are holding over the next few months. They will be very valuable. They're hosted by various colleagues, so it's not just listening to myself and Ian as normal. There's other colleagues who can help support with the delivering those CPD sessions. As you can see, we are holding trade-specific webinars as well, and regarding BSc, they're currently being confirmed. So I hope you found this webinar useful so far. I'll now just pause for a brief moment whilst we open up your questions prior to working our way through your answers. So have a little reflection, have a think about some of your queries, some of your thoughts, even if it's just some feedback. Is there anything we went through that maybe we didn't explain well enough you'd like us to cover back over again? Just have a think about some of those. I'm just going to open up the questions tab now, and then we'll start showing some of these responses with the panel. So there's quite a few to work through. The first one we've got, I'll probably come to Ian Roberts on this one. Hi, Ian. Is the assessor assessing the employer's evidence or IQAing the employer's evidence?
What will be happening is they won't be assessing it, they'll be working collaboratively together, looking at the evidence that's been submitted or being gathered by the learner. And what would happen then is the external assessor would then look at the evidence as he's been doing the professional discussion as well, so that the learner can relate to that as they're actually doing it. The idea of the employer confirmation guide is that that is the evidence to support that meets the occupational competency statements gathered from industry. And then it will, like I mentioned earlier, it will allow give the federations, employers and everyone else the confidence that that learner has covered the relevant tasks and is proficient in them as well. And will also allow that learner then to gain the CSCS card, or any competency card I should say, when they're going on back onto site or into industry, the relevant industry. So it would be the external assessor that will be checking it, but let's not forget it will be collaboratively between the training provider and also the employer and the learner. So it's collaboratively working together, but it'll be checked and verified again by the external quality assurer, or I should say the external assessor as they come out to do the professional discussion.
Thank you very much, Ian. Next question, Kevin, if I can put this question to you, please. What is the GLH for learning in college, i.e. taught sessions?
Thanks, David. Yeah, so within the handbooks themselves, I think it's on the first couple of pages. Have a look there because each of the units have GLH assigned. So looking at the electrical installation manual, which I'm obviously very familiar with, that the qualification comprises of knowledge and understanding theory units and also on-site units. So each of those theory units, would be typically delivered in the college at the centre. So therefore, they have those GLH assigned. So it's quite easy to determine. Some of the units have some, I think within the construction, have some skills, etc. in. But the way I look at it is the GLH is still assigned to those units, and the trade hasn't fundamentally changed. So therefore, have a look at what typical delivery, historic delivery is currently. So hopefully that answers the question.
That's great. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank
so
you.
yeah, I suppose the same for all trades. Check the handbook, check the GLH against each unit and whether it's a theory, a practical unit or an on-site unit. And I think you're right, it's not really changed dramatically. So we would assume it's going to be quite comparable to the delivery time you've had previously. The next one's quite a long question. Probably come back to Ian for this, please, Ian. So we've got a query here. It worries me that the apprentice bricklayer who works for a standard house building company such as Red Row will not be able to gain enough of the on-site evidence such as concreting, brickwork, masonry, cladding and so on. What provision is in place for an employer who doesn't meet this scope of qualification? Will we be able to simulate complex brickwork in a college environment, for example?
It's no different to what we've got now at this moment in time, because we've got to work in line with the consolidated assessment strategy that the industry has put together along with the CITB. If it's a realistic working environment, which it has to be, then that's where the evidence has got to come from. Where we've got the shared apprenticeship schemes, Cyflw and Apprentice, where they can move around. I understand it is slightly different, but employers are aware of the new standards and aware of the new criteria, and that's what the learner has got to gather moving forward. So they've got to gather it from industry, they've got to gather that relevant evidence from the realistic working environment. And this is what the review actually identified as well, to be able to make sure that learners, when they're coming through their apprenticeship at the end, had the relevant knowledge and understanding and industrial experience as well to carry out these activities moving forward. So, and that's the main reasons why you've got such as concreting built into that and other areas as well that you may not have done previously. But what we have to remember is this is a new qualification, and it's what industry are expecting the learners to be able to do. So having to work closely and collaborative with employers to see if they can cover the relevant skills that the learner will have to do in industry. So unless it's allowed for simulation, then no, it will not be. And what's in the new qualification structure will have to come from the realistic working environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Another question for Kevin. You state professional discussion is a final assessment. Is there no further EPA such as electrical installations AM2?
Yeah, great question. So yes, the professional discussion will be the final assessment of the qualification, but the qualification will form part of an apprenticeship framework, and within that framework, the typical AM2 test will be expected to be in that framework. So those frameworks are just out for consultation at the moment. So so for building services, if you consult with colleagues, we have sent out various communications, so that will enable people to get up to speed with those particular frameworks.
Thanks, Kevin. I think the closing date for a lot of those reviews is this Friday. Am I right? Is that correct?
I think you're right, David. I'd have to double check, but I think you're right. Yes.
Is it is it possible to drop the links into the chat whilst we're on this webinar, and then people can get direct access to that?
Absolutely. I'll certainly have a look now.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you.
The next question, I think this could probably go between Ian and Harrod. I don't know if it's the right session, but when will the funding structure and framework values and durations be released?
Regarding the frameworks, and I'll just step in at the moment if I may, the frameworks have been put together at the moment, at this current moment, and it's just about to be finalised now. I think it goes to the relevant Welsh Government, and then it goes out for review to industry by the 16th of February, is my understanding, and that's the information we've received back from the Construction Industries Training Board. So then we'll probably know more after that. But regarding the funding for this, I'm presuming we'll have to wait until they've been finalised, unless Anne Harrod has anything further to add.
Yeah, that's right, Ian. We're just waiting for everything to be finalised and to be confirmed. Once we have that information, we can share that with the centres then.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And the next question is from a Warrington Wolves supporter, but we won't hold that against them. Where do current apprentices who are due to complete both a level 2 framework, VRQ and MBQ this academic year, enter the new level 3 apprenticeship programme? So probably, probably give two different responses from Kevin and Ian or Jason.
Yeah, I'll do the construction one. Current apprentices who's finished completing the current framework this academic year, then they will step into the new level 3 qualification, or the apprenticeship qualification moving forward. What has been achieved will be able to be carried across, and then they'll fill the gaps accordingly, that what's actually there. So what they've achieved will be mapped across, and then move it forward onto the new level 3 framework. Okay.
Thanks, Ian. Have you got anything to add, Kevin?
Just to say, existing apprentices will complete on their learning aims and apprenticeship. New starts will start on a new apprenticeship. Learners, particularly electrical installation, who are currently undertaking full-time, for example, EAL level 2, level 3 diploma in electrical installation, we have started to produce some mapping documentation in order for centres to look at recognition of prior learning to move into the new apprenticeship qualification. So that will be available shortly.
And that's the same for construction as well. We're on with the mapping at this moment in time. So what we've done with the mapping, for a full-time learner who will be completing a level 2 diploma in the current legacy qualifications, we'll map that across to the level 3, as well as the learners completing a level 2 framework as well as. So there'll be 2 sets of mapping documents that'll be put forward very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Next question, are there going to be qualification specific webinars? Yes, they're planned in. Again, we can try and drop the link in for those. I notice in the chat that Kevin has put in the links to the consultation for the framework, so please have a look at those. The next question then, do learners need to complete foundation? Can they be enrolled on progression without completing the foundation? Where do the core units fit? So Ian or Jason, would you like to pick that up?
Sorry,
if you are
David.
talking, you're on mute.
No, sorry, I couldn't get off mute, to be honest.
No problem.
Okay, so it's still learners need to complete the foundation, can be enrolled on progression without complete. Right. A learner, is that the question, David? Do learners need to
yeah, there's two questions really, I suppose. Can a learner jump the foundation and go direct to the progression? And I guess if the question then is, where would the core units fit with the foundation? So it's probably two questions, I think.
Yeah, we'll try and answer them both, to be honest. I think what we've got to remember is the foundation qualification is really not a mandatory requirement, but it's an entry requirement to help support them gain good knowledge and understanding of the industry as a whole. And then it's a nice smooth transition then into the progression qualification. So moving forward from this September, it would be expected that all full-time learners who are not employed should commence the foundation qualification. And then once they've completed the foundation qualification, they can then step into the progression qualification moving forward. If we come end of this academic year and unfortunately the learners do not all, or you get the odd learner that does not achieve the foundation qualification, they can step into the progression, but what they must do is complete and do the resits before they actually commence it, commence the progression qualification. So what you would have is you'd have the learners who need resits or resubmissions on various work, or maybe have to resit the guided discussion. They can complete that, but so we're not disadvantaging the learners from moving forward into the progression qualification. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much, Ian. I've tried to type out a bit of a response as well, so hopefully that explains it. Again, if any of these answers are not what you were looking for, if we've misunderstood the question, please type in again. We'll keep going as long as we can to try and answer all of your questions. If we can't answer any, we will take them away and try and come back with an answer very quickly. So moving on, if the apprenticeship is not an MBQ, how will the CPS schemes view this for qualifying managers? So I know you've done some work with this, Ian, and you understand this quite well. Could you offer a quick response to that, please?
Yeah, I'm presuming the question's relating to the plant operator, the CPCS card. I'm presuming that's what it's referring to. I hope I'm correct. Discussions are underway and they are looking into it, and it looks like they're going to accept it, but there'll be obviously the assessment methods that they've got to complete, and obviously as part of that they're still going to have to do achieve what they call the red card. So they're going to have to pass the training element from the CPCS, moving that forward. But yes, definitely they will recognise the CPCS card and they will achieve that, which is the competency card for plant operations, but they will still have to do the red training card, achieve that as they're working through that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Next question, probably linked to an earlier one, which I'll try and answer. This clearly states the foundation / level 1 to be completed before progression. Why are the awarding bodies not making this a stipulation? The foundation is level 2, it's not a level 1. Some learners may enter at level 1 standard. It may be the most appropriate and suitable level for them. They may do a level 1 and then may progress on to the level 2 foundation. And yes, it is the expectation that the entry point for the majority of learners will be the foundation qualification. But there's nothing mandatory at the moment that states it's a mandatory prerequisite for the progression. I would probably discourage coming in directly on the progression, because if a learner continues into the apprenticeship, they'd then have to double back and do the core, where they wouldn't have to had they done the foundation qualification. And the foundation coming at the start is probably better than a little bit later on during the apprenticeship, because it's giving all that base knowledge and all the generic knowledge and skills to support that learner on the journey. So I'd argue it's probably the most appropriate approach. It's the expected approach, but it's not mandatory currently. Has any of the panel anything to add to that? Or has that explained it, do you think?
That explains it fine, David. Thank you.
Thank you. Can the progression qualification be delivered before the foundation qualification? I'm not sure why you would do that. I don't know why you'd put someone on the progression and then go back to the foundation. It's certainly not encouraged or expected to be delivered that way. I think it wouldn't be very suitable for the learner themselves. So I'd probably discourage that. Someone asking, is this being recorded? Yes, we are recording this. It should go out to everyone in attendance automatically, and we'll look to process it to host it on the Skills for Wales website as soon as we can after we complete. So hopefully everyone will have an opportunity to come back and review it again, or if you couldn't make it live, you can hopefully get access to it. How do we register for trade-specific events? So what we'll do in a moment, I see, if you look in the chat, someone's beat me to it, Mr. Howe. Jason's already put in the direct link to all the upcoming events. So please do have a look on those and register. And remember, if you don't make it live, if you've already registered but you can't make it live, it will send you an automatic link to the recording following it. So if you see the date and time, think, oh, I'm not too sure, I might have a class that time, I'd suggest you register anyway, and then you will get the follow-up link to the recording. Will there be any specific additional webinars regarding the built environment rather than a trade-specific course? I don't believe there's anything specific outside of the qualifications. I don't know if anyone from the panel can update me.
No, you're correct, David, but if there's any support required, you're more than happy to contact us and we'll provide you with any guidance that you require. We will be carrying out some CPD events over the next few weeks, like David's already mentioned. But if it's something specific, don't hesitate to drop us an email or put it onto the Skills for Wales website as a question, and we'll come back to it, or you can either email either of us accordingly. We're there to help and support in any way we can.
Thank you very much, Ian. Are we still providing practical training in the workshops? Yes, I mean, as part of someone's learning journey, they need some skills to be developed. So I'd say the training is very much in the workshops at times, which is relevant to that trade area. We've often encouraging when we've been out and about and talking to staff. If you look at the handbook and you look at the content in there, just because it is knowledge doesn't always necessarily mean it has to be delivered in a classroom. The example we gave is a lot of the content, assessment criteria will be no different types of tools used in the plumbing industry, for example. Just because it's knowledge doesn't mean you have to do it in a classroom. That may be better suited to delivery actually in a workshop. The learners are in the workshop, you can pull out the tools from the stores and talk learners through the tools. They can have a practice with them. They're still gaining the knowledge of that without necessarily being sat in a classroom. So try and have a look at the content and see where it's most suitable to deliver that type of training for the learner. I think I may have missed one out, so I'm going to double back one. Will there be any specific, oh no, I've read that out, sorry. What happens to the current level 2 MVQ candidates who want to progress to level 3? Well, I think probably the answer Ian gave earlier, and Kevin, is that they're looking at a mapping currently, that's at various levels of development. So that learner, if employed, would progress onto the level 3 qualification. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, the question may also refer to a learner who's just completed an MVQ level 2, so like an experienced worker maybe. And if that's what you're referring to, if it's a learner that's just completed an MVQ level 2, they can still progress onto an MVQ level 3. It just will not be funded commencing after the 31st of May. If it's the frameworks, we've already answered that question, where they would be able to slide across to the new level 3 qualification. And as David says, the mapping documents will be there. But if it's just a purely MVQ level 2, stepping up to an MVQ level 3, NVQs will still be there for the foreseeable future. They just will not be funded. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. The next question, can the qualification assessment packs be split into trade-specific routes? If it's a level 3 apprenticeship, it will already be trade-specific. So I'm not sure if that question is referring to the foundation, which is a single pack with all the trade areas. If that's the case, then yes, that's perfectly fine. Do you know when the practical projects will be made available? Ian and Kevin, can put that to yourselves, please.
They are available now, David, on the Skills for Wales website. If this is referring to the level 3, and we also have, if it is referring to the progression, we have samples there as well for the progression.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you.
And in the construction, it's very similar to what Kevin's mentioned. They are in the assessment pack, and it depends on what the employer will be able to provide at that moment in time. So like we've said, they are work-based projects of these. That's the final assessment. Sorry, not the final assessment, but the project is a work carried out in the industry. So it's a work-based project, and it can't be any more than 4 activities, maximum of 4. It's got to meet roughly the hours that's actually there, as we stipulating in each particular trade area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What was the rationale behind having internal set practical projects? Anyone from the panel best suited to answer that question, please?
There's no internally set practical projects for the level 3. It's only for the foundation and progression. So practical projects. So really, there's no internally set practical projects. The project that's carried out in industry will be set by the employer along with the learner and the training provider. So all 3 would agree within the relevant tasks that's highlighted. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. One for Kevin. With regard to the practical project, for example, electrical, will this have to be completed on site or in college?
Yeah, that just follows on from Ian's answer. It's on site in industry, the practical project, but as mentioned in the presentation, for the heating and ventilation trades and the electrotechnical, there are practical assessments, safety critical practical assessments as part of the apprenticeship qualification. So they are all in the assessment pack on the Skills for Wales website. So they deal with for electrical connection and termination, inspection and testing, safe isolation, etc. So hopefully that answers that one.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you.
Will the train? Sorry, did you have something to add?
Sorry,
No,
Dave, I said thank you.
Oh, right, sorry. Will the training providers be carrying out the professional discussions or lecturing staff? Do you mean the centre or the awarding organisation, I suspect that query is? Ian, would you like to respond to that one?
Yes, the people that's carrying out the professional discussion will be external assessors employed by the relevant awarding organisation, and these external assessors will be trade specific independent external assessors carrying that out. So no, it won't be anybody within the college or training provider. It will be member of the awarding organisation who will be trade specific. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Another question about will there be any training undertaken in the college? I kind of responded to a similar question just before. Yes, I would expect so, and have a look in the handbooks. What about level 2 sitting guilds learners? So not entirely sure what the question is there. I mean, hopefully they're successful in getting employment and they can progress into the apprenticeship. Any news on the heating and ventilation? Kevin, can you add any updates on that, please?
Yes, so again, just to reiterate, all the handbooks and the assessment packs for the level 3 installer and craftsperson trade are available on the Skills for Wales website. And we will be running some further trade-specific webinars in relation to those qualifications. They are slightly different in the sense that they don't have a progression qualification, so they will be solely for apprentices in those 2 trades. And also the heating and ventilator installer allows for, it's set up in a way that it allows for progression into the craftsperson trade as well. So I'll talk about that further on the trade-specific webinar.
Thanks very much, Kevin. The next question is the registration date for the current qualification, end of May 22. There's various end registration dates for qualifications. I know many of Sitting Guilds qualifications are extending their registration dates. They're likely to continue for a number of years whilst there's still demand. But as providers, your query is probably more around what is funded rather than what you can register on. We may have qualifications, and EAL may have qualifications that are available to you. You can run, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily funded. So as it stands at the moment, all the new qualifications are the funded provision from in the next academic year. But if you wanted to run things unfunded and register, you just then refer to the qualification itself. The next question: is there an electronic portfolio available for centres to use with the new qualifications? Not at this moment in time. We have had a lot of feedback around electronic portfolios, and the fact that the assessments are much different than previous MVQs, which were unitised and quite well suited to e-portfolios. This is now a project that comes at the end of the programme, and it's similar in the progression and the foundation, where it's more end assessed. There's not the same ongoing evidence requirements that is assessed unitised on the journey. There is the employer confirmatory sign-off, but that's a little bit different than what we're used to with MVQs, and so we need to make that clear. We are looking at the potential to make some of the documents editable PDFs, so we are looking at that currently. If you've got any more feedback on that, it'd be great to hear about that in the survey that we'll follow up with. And this is probably a good time to mention that survey. I know it's a pain having to fill in yet another survey, but it's so important for us to hear from you what we're doing well. What do you like about these? Do you value these sessions? It's great to hear that. And where are your pinch points? Where do you see your barriers? Let us know all of those things. If it's on the survey, it's held centrally, and it's held by our marketing teams, and our senior managers will review that, and that helps inform the direction we take things in. So please do take the time to complete those. Progression direct entry will work for mature learner or experienced. I suppose, is that a query or a question or just a statement? I don't know if anyone in the panel have got anything to add to that.
Yeah, just to say, David, yeah, for a mature learner, they could just go straight into the progression qualification, but the expectation would be, you know, for a school leaver to do the foundation and then go on to the progression. There are entry requirements within the various handbooks as well, so that would be a good point of reference to have a look at the expectations around entry into the qualifications. I'd have to go back now to remind myself what's in the progression in particular, but hopefully that answers that question.
It's a really good point, Kevin. Yeah, entry requirements are in the handbooks, and there's various entry requirements for different qualifications. So often when put on the spot, you're trying to remember off the top of your head, but we can all access those handbooks. They're all available on the Skills for Wales website. So have a quick look in there, have a look at the entry requirements. If you're still a bit unsure, then please do come back to us. The follow-up question, City Girls 2365 learners that want to go on the electrical qualifications. So the new suite of qualifications don't have a level 3 full-time qualification. The level 3 qualification is linked to the apprenticeship. So if a level 2 learner progresses, they can progress onto the level 3 apprenticeship program. And Kevin's working on some mapping documents currently to see which assessments those learners would be exempt from, which may reduce their time on that apprenticeship program. Very similar to what we both have now in the current qualifications. So the next one is quite a long question, so bear with me, I'll read it out. There are around 200 GLH for the 7 common units in BSc. A learner that has completed the foundation through FE, who then gets employment, will not need to complete these and can go on to the second year of the apprenticeship. This means for the first year of the apprenticeship, only the 7 core units will be delivered, no electrical units. Are employers going to be happy with the fact the apprentices will not have any electrical units delivered in the first year? So I suppose that's aimed at electrical, but I suggest the sentiments are the same across all trade areas. So I don't know if you can offer an answer initially, Kevin, and then possibly Ian and Jason can add to it maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it might be worth revisiting and comparing the foundation to the apprenticeship qualification. So the learner, the apprentice, would be absolutely, from day one studying the electrical industry and everything, what they do, like they do currently. The units within the foundation qualification are, different to the apprenticeship. The only two qualifications that have that kind of relationship is the progression qualification and the apprenticeship. But even that is beneficial to the learner in centres in the sense that a learner who completes the progression qualification would have completed a set of units that they'd already completed, which the apprentices will complete, let's say, within the first 2 years. So that enables that learner to take the progression test achievements and all that learning into the apprenticeship qualification. So there's a nice learner journey there. So it might also be worth reflecting back on the learner journeys, the typical learner journeys for this particular question. And I'm more than happy to speak in person to, about this further to allay any fears, if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
David.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I think what naturally happens from my experience of teaching on programs is even in some of the generic type units that you find in the foundation, there are also very similar content and units in our current apprenticeship qualifications. It's just that when we deliver things like health and safety, if we're an electrical bias or a brickwork bias, we'll be referring that health and safety to working as a bricklayer on site. So it gives it context. So I don't see it as being completely separate. It's really good practice to be associating it with the trade or trades that those learners are interested in. So please try not to look at it as being completely separate to the trade. It's meant to support and be associated with the trades, and that's where your skills as tutors and your own experiences of working in industry naturally come out in those teaching. With regards to the practical project in electrical, do you do it on site or do you do it in college? I suppose a straight question there, Kevin.
Yeah, so it goes back to the previous question as well. The on-site practical project will be done on site, but as previously stated, there will be safety critical practical assessments only for the electrical and heating and ventilation trades, which will be done in the college for obvious reasons, covering safe isolation and use of electrical tools for heating and ventilation trades and for electrical trades. Similar, but also with connection termination, inspection and testing, and fault finding. But the practical project will be done on site. Hopefully that answered that question.
Thank you very much. The next question, can a learner currently completing a full-time level 1 go on to the progression qualification next year? Again, as before, the expected entrance is a foundation level 2 qualification, and those units in that qualification are required as part of an apprenticeship. If a learner hasn't done those and they have an apprenticeship, they would have to double back to do those. So I'd probably discourage that if I could, but there's nothing mandatory at this moment in time as an entrance requirement for the progression. But it's not designed that way, it's not expected, and I don't think it'd be most appropriate for the learners. I'm just going to jump ahead one. If the foundation isn't mandatory as stated, does that mean if a student wishes to go on to the progression course in the trade specific of their choice, then this will be allowed? Same answer. It's not mandatory, but it's discouraged. And what you could have is a learner getting an apprenticeship after doing a level 1, then the progression, and having to double back to do the foundation. So it's not a natural flow of progression. And many of the foundation units are generic. It's the same content that you would deliver, like health and safety, like at level 2. Your level 1 progressing into it wouldn't be a health and safety unit at level 2. So in the foundation, they do working with others. All of these are very similar content that you would get in in current qualifications. Yes, there are things that are new. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There's new content. It enhances the experience for that learner, gives them a breadth of understanding across the industries. And again, I know this from direct experience myself, that I've taken on learners into certain trades, and within 12 months, they've wanted to move to a different trade. Once you've done the foundation, you can move on to any progression that you like. If you get an apprenticeship in brickwork, but you did a progression, plumbing and electrical, you wouldn't have to double back and do those core units because you've already done the core in the foundation. So there's a massive benefit for a learner there, that if they do that foundation qualification, regardless of where they progress to, whichever trade, there's no doubling back for that learner having to do those units. So hopefully you see the value in the foundation qualification for those learners.
I think we also have to remember as well that, don't forget, this will be the last academic year you'll have a trade-specific level 1 qualification funded. The rest will be generic moving forward. So, for example, 6219, 05 and 07 pathways, which are generic, will be funded, but trade-specific level 1s will not be funded after May this year, May 2022. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ian. That's a really good point. Yeah, there's no trade-specific level 1, so it feeds naturally into the foundation. Will current level 2 learners have to start the 3-year apprenticeship, therefore take 5 years in total to complete? I wouldn't say so. I mean, all the apprenticeships are slightly different lengths, but as we've said before, we're working on mapping, so there will be some mapping. There's likely to be some exemption, and if you've taught a learner something, you probably wouldn't want to teach it them again. Even if there's some assessment they need to take, it may only be a refresher. So I wouldn't think you'd need the full time again to repeat everything again, because hopefully they've retained some of that knowledge. There's plenty of questions, so I'm going to have to try and get through them quickly.
Just come back to that one, David.
Yeah, sure.
What they're actually looking at as well is putting some inkling into that, because if it's a level 2, a learner that's completed a level 2 framework and it's moving across to the level 3, then obviously there's just gaps that they have to complete and move forward. But if it's a learner on a level 2 diploma, then obviously they've got additional units to complete, but it's the work-based evidence that they're going to have to gather as well. That's where the additional learning or time may be required. Thank you, David.
Thank you. A question, I think Kevin half answered this before. Is the progression purely full-time?
No, not at all. So there could be, for example, mature learners, who wish to come back and retrain, who take it, part-time study. So yeah, how that's delivered is obviously up to the centre for that, particular cohorts of learners. But typically for full-time learners, that they would do full-time, undertake the qualification full-time after the foundation. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you very much. There's a few questions here about core and foundation. I do worry that some may be getting mixed up. The core qualification is only for apprentices, and the core qualification is identical to the foundation qualification, but is only one trade unit. And if a learner does the foundation, they do all the mandatory units in there and 2 trades. If you're on the apprenticeship, you do a core qualification which mirrors identical to the foundation, but only one trade area, because you're only on one trade as the apprenticeship. If you've already done a foundation, you wouldn't need to do that if you move from a foundation to an apprenticeship. So you wouldn't have to do the core. So hopefully that explains a few queries around that. Is there going to be teaching resource coming for the progression and level 3? So if I ask someone from the panel to respond to that, please.
Yes, David, it broke up then, did my sound.
Okay, no problem. So
David,
I don't know if the question, will there be a teaching resource for the level 3?
Oh, sorry, thank you. What they're actually looking at the moment is we have got some further resource that's already been developed on Smart Screen, and EAL have got something similar as well, I've no doubt, for the building services. There is a mapping document that Hodder textbooks are putting together to map across from the current textbooks that they have to the level 3 qualification. Regarding the progression, we have got some unit content sheets on there that will help people to be able to move that forward. But at this moment in time, there's nothing further to be added than what we've currently got developed on Smart Screen, which covers all the topic areas, apart from a couple of units that's in the progression at this moment in time. Because like we've said before, the progression is mirrored across to the National Occupational Standards, and that's where it's being built across from and being developed accordingly. Regarding resources directly to the progression units itself, no, we haven't at this moment in time, and we may be looking to plan it for the future, but it is not imminent. But what we have to reinforce, we've currently got, and people have already got their own resources, what they delivered previously, is what we've currently got is the Smart Screen, and I've no doubt EAL will have something similar as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Will the current EL Level 2 diploma be funded in Wales next year if candidates have registered before the end of May 2022? I suspect not. We may have to take some funding advice on this, but from my experience of working with funding, you're funded in academic years. So if you are registering the learner for funding in this academic year, you'll get the funding this year and they'll complete this year. Once you go into the next academic year, you'll get funding for that year. I think what we've got to realise is registration on a qualification and funding are two separate things. Just because you're registered on a qualification doesn't automatically mean it's funded at that time. But we may need to take some further advice from Skills for Wales, who are funding those qualifications. Can anyone add to my understanding of the funding there?
I can't add anything, David. I think you're right. We'd have to look into that further to get a precise answer.
Yeah. It's I would say probably unlikely, but I can't commit to that answer because I do know it's come up before in the past in other areas. And as I say, that funding is per academic year. Registration on a qual can happen at any time. Going back to the question about level 2 to level 3, will the level 3 then take 1 year? It will differ for every qualification because each apprenticeship is slightly different durations, so there's not a single answer. And until we see the full mapping, it's very difficult to say. And we don't always know the experience that learner is getting as part of the apprenticeship. So even though you may feel you could deliver it in 1 year, the learners may progress at different stages, may be getting different experiences on site. It may take them longer to gain all that experience on site that they have to provide. So it's very difficult to give you a definitive answer on that, certainly at this stage. Will practical training take place in the college? Again, yes, I think we've had that question a few times. Why isn't there an apprentice route for building maintenance qualification? I suspect from the review, these are the main core qualifications that were deemed as routes and requirements for the industry. If you feel there's additional routes that haven't been taken in consideration, it will be probably something that will be part of a higher level conversation. But if you feel strongly about that, again, it may be worth putting that response in the survey so we can take that back to our friends and colleagues at Skills for Wales. If the professional discussion is to be completed by the college, logistically, how much notice is going to be required for EQA to attend the campus? Completed. Well, it's not done by the college, it's done by the assessment organisation. Ian, I know you answered that before. Is there anything else you could add?
No, not really. I think the main thing is what this will come out in the next few weeks, few months, to be honest, regarding the planning of it and how this will actually take place. So although I think the main point to put over is that the colleges will have no involvement with the professional discussion or training providers, which is less assessment for them to be concerned about. The professional discussion will be carried out by a member of the awarding organisation, which will be the external assessor, trade specific, like we've mentioned. Regarding notice, then that's something we'll be forwarding to you in the very near future. All right, so that's something to be keeping your eyes open for, and I've no doubt will be in the next few weeks, if not mostly a couple of months, to get that sorted. Okay, so I can't give you a definitive answer, but it will come very soon, will that. It's about planning and organisation of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does the employer have to fill in more than one employer confirmation guide if they have multiple apprentices? I suspect so, yes, because it's the confirmation guide that specific learner has had that specific experience that meets those requirements. Am I correct, panel?
Yes, that's correct, David. Each learner will have their own employer confirmation guide because it's specific to that individual. It's when you've got maybe more than one employer working with that learner, especially through the shared apprenticeship schemes. So that may happen, or if the learner moves from employer to employer to make sure they can gather the relevant evidence accordingly. Thank you
very much. Can learners who with no apprenticeship still complete the level 3? Well, the level 3 we're discussing now is an apprenticeship qualification, so that would need to be run as part of a apprenticeship. There are still level 3 qualifications available, but they're not funded provision as of next year. Hopefully that answers that question. Next question seems to be a duplicate of a previous one, or unless we didn't answer it correctly. Please let us know if we need to explain it again or whether it was just a duplicate. Will there be mapping from students from Sitting Guilds level 2 into level 3 when they gain employment? Yes, that's what Kevin spoke about. He will be covering some mapping to show where a learner will enter at level 3. Have the employers been notified by QW about their role within the new qualifications? Well, I do know that some of my colleagues have been having various stakeholder meetings with various employers, and they've been involved at those stages, and we've been discussing them. So I do know some of those conversations have happened, and I'd also recommend that centres themselves, when you're having the updates with your own employers, if you do what I used to do at the centres, run updates for my employers, I'd be sharing this information with them as well to try and make sure that we're getting the message out to as many as we possibly can. What happens to learners who achieve the level 2 this year? Can they still go on to MVQ only? If they're progressing in this September, I mean, this is around the plumbing one, they would go on to the new apprenticeship. There's no MVQ2 only in the new qualifications. So again, there's a difference between the suite of new qualifications that are funded for these learners and what assessment organisations may have available. So we may have an MVQ2 available to you, but it's not part of these funded qualifications. So if you're taking them on as an apprentice, they would do the new qualification for the new apprenticeship. Could a part-time evening or mature learner start on the progression route? Jason or Ian, could you answer that initially, please?
Sorry, David, I've just come back on again. I'm having terrible problems at the moment with my Teams, with my sound, sorry. What was the question again, David? Sorry.
So can the part-time evening or mature learner start on the progression route?
Again, if they're mature people and they've got the relevant experience, then yes, they can commence on that to move that forward, so you don't disadvantage the individual learner. But again, you'll have to pick up the relevant knowledge and understanding of some of the core units that they will need to be able to move forward with that. But yes, they can, just provided they've got prior experience, so you're not disadvantaging that individual learner. Nothing stopping them, although it would be deemed as not poor practice, that's wrong, but it would be deemed to be, could be deemed as disadvantaging the learner as well, because some of the learners may do the foundation before moving on to the progression. So
yeah, there's a lot of common units, isn't there, that are valuable to that learner,
yeah.
that they'd be missing out on without the foundation. So you'd have to be careful that you're not disadvantaging the learner as well, but I suppose it's for providers to become familiar with the learners, prospective learners, the content, and put them on the most suitable and appropriate pathway. But yeah, I would take another look at the foundation. Next question, whose choice was it to stop any full-time learners in Wales studying or being funded to a level 3 when other devolved nations are allowed to do so? Well, I'm not entirely sure how to answer this other than to say that the same as what we said before, really. You know, Anne Harrod spoke at the beginning about the Building the Futures review that was done in Wales. So all the decisions that are made are from quite a large and comprehensive review. And I know we've discussed this in the past when we did all our original webinars on this way back, and that's where these decisions have derived from. And the other devolved nations haven't necessarily got funding at level 3. It does differ, and it's very difficult to compare directly. So I don't think it's always a fair comparison looking at that. I know our colleague on the call now, Jason Howe's done a lot of work. Yeah.
David, we have run over by 15 minutes at this moment. I mean, we're more than happy to stop on, but the numbers people, attendees are starting to leave. I don't know.
Wow, I didn't realise we'd gone over that much. We do have a lot of questions. What I'll do then now is we're going to stay on and continue answering these questions, but let's formally close because we've passed the time and you will have other things that you need to go and do. I'm sure you've got classes and so on. So we do understand if you have to leave. Let us say from the whole panel, thank you very much for your attendance. Sorry it run over. It's probably due to the amount of questions that we've got. I just like to remind you that we have the survey coming out, so please do look out for the survey and complete that. I'd like to thank all the panel who've all contributed and all supported to the presentation, all supported to the questions, and to your valuable input from the questions as well. That makes it and enriches these sessions. So we hope you have enjoyed it. We hope you've learned from it. We'll stay on a bit longer trying to answer those, but if you need to drift, we totally understand. So thank you very much to everyone. So we'll double back and try and answer some more questions whilst we can, and then we will try to close timely. EL level 2 learners would be mapped across. He did not say sitting girls. Right, okay. I think, Kevin, am I right in assuming that the mapping that you're looking will incorporate equivalent qualifications?
Yeah, we want to make this transition as seamless as possible. So the mapping I've done for the EAL qualifications, that's a really good point. I'll pick that up internally and obviously offer my services to look at mapping the Sitting Guilds 2365 over. And it should also be noted that a really important point is that RPL from the current or soon to be historic full-time level 2 qualifications, so we're talking here specifically full-time qualifications. The learner will take that learning into, for example, if they get an apprenticeship, their apprenticeship qualification, but they'll still have to sit the progression, test 1 in the apprenticeship. So it doesn't give them exemption from the apprenticeship qualification assessments, but it certainly gives them that recognition of learning, not attainment, but enables them to move into the apprenticeship and complete that apprenticeship a bit quicker based on the learning they've previously undertaken. So hopefully that answers that question, David.
Thank you very much. Next question, how are candidates put forward going to be compiled and available to be quality assured? We will have more information on this, and it's a confirmation sign-off with some evidence to support it. It's not like the old MVQs, so if you're picturing in your minds the MVQ as they used to be, this is much different. So it's going to be different, and hopefully the learner will have the same value of experience, but have an easier process to demonstrating that. Will awarding organisation assessors be completing professional discussions face-to-face or virtual, and how long will they have to wait, Ian?
Sorry, what's that again, David?
So are the professional discussions face-to-face or virtual, and how long is the gap from confirming readiness to the assessment taking place?
Thank you. I'm just answering that question, to be honest.
All right, you're typing the response here.
Know what it'll be. I mean, it's still to be confirmed, but virtual is the preferred option, and then this process will ensure that no learner is disadvantaged, and that then we can do it in a timely manner. That's the crucial part of it. But what would happen is the centre will confirm that the candidate or the learner is ready to carry out the professional discussion, and it should be carried out within 3 weeks of that learner completing his work-based project. That's what the process should be. But again, we're just waiting for that to be confirmed, but it is looking like it's going to be virtual due to the number of learners that will be working through it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. The question here about the most suitable approach for a site engineer or assistant QS or a manager. I don't think there's anything in this specific suite directly against those job roles, but again, if there's something that you feel is missing, please put that in your feedback. If state and describe questions are changing to be more holistic, how do we track them without an e-portfolio? You know, the e-portfolio is normally associated with on-site evidence, so maybe you'd have to come back and you know, explain to me a little bit more about what you're getting at there. Apologies if I don't quite follow. If you start an apprenticeship and carrying out the foundation, is there anything to stop an employer carrying out practical work at level 3 for that standard? So I think the question is, if the learners starting the apprenticeship, they won't do the foundation course, they'll do the core, which is, yes, the foundation units, probably what you meant. Yeah, they can still be doing the work experience because they'll be employed working in that industry. Again, many of those units are what you typically find on most apprenticeships anyway. So, and you'd run before you got to the more detailed trade-specific units. So it's not massively different in my opinion. Is the 7201 being funded? Yes, that's being funded. Can you clarify if learners completing the 7202 will still need to complete the full foundation and cannot go on to progression? Same answer as before. There's no mandatory entry requirements to the progression, but we would discourage it for all the same reasons we said before about the foundation, and the foundation is at level 2. Is there a direct route onto level 3 BSc? Yes, there's direct routes to level 3 for employed learners on all the trades. If a candidate completes an 01 this academic year, can they progress to the progression next year? Again, it's possible, but it would be, I'm not sure it would be the most appropriate pathway for that learner. The foundation is at level 2 and incorporates all the common units you'd normally find in many of the previous level 2 and level 3 qualifications. You kind of be skipping some of those common units, and if they got the apprenticeship, they'd have to double back anyway. So whilst it's possible, I'm not sure it is the most appropriate. Will the employer now have to observe a sign-off all criteria for the apprentices? Ian?
Yeah, just very quickly, what would happen is as the learner is working through his employer confirmation guide, the employer will sign off to say that learner is proficient at that moment in time for the various activities that he'll be carrying out, and they will be gathering evidence accordingly to support that. But it will not be as draconian as what you'd actually find in an MVQ portfolio. So that's what would happen. So the employer would sign off to confirm that that learner is proficient with the evidence from industry. Not the project, that's the assessor that would do that. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions about progressors from level 1s. Again, anyone can enter the progression qualification if they're deemed at that level and it's appropriate for them. But the expectation is to do the foundation for all the benefits and reasons that we've suggested before. So The providers would look at that as part of their curriculum planning. They would know the learners, they would know the content and put them on the most appropriate qualification. I would suspect that the foundation would be the most appropriate route, but again, there's nothing mandatory. Whether they've got a level 1 or not, it depends on whether you feel the progression is appropriate for them. Who employs external assessors? Ian?
Yeah, just quickly, gentlemen and ladies, yes, they'll be employed by the awarding organisation. So for construction, it'll be City and Guilds, not directly employed, but through building services will be EAL. And I do believe they have got some directly employed people. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Probably come to Kevin for this one, and we're near the end, thankfully, for everyone, so we may not keep you much longer. The practical project is done on site and evidence gathered by the assessor or the employer. Well, I suspect the responsibility for the project lies with both the assessor, the learner and the employer, but anything you can add to that, Kevin?
Yeah, I think that really the best answer, well, you have summarised it there, David, but certainly I recommend please do have a look at the assessment pack, because it will involve planning on all those parties to identify a specific project to enable the learner to cover the criteria, and also really give them the opportunity to showcase their skills. So it's a union of all those employer, centre and learner in the planning for the practical project, which is a great thing. So they're not just ticking boxes and just completing a logbook. It really gives them that opportunity to showcase their skills. Hopefully that answers the question, David.
Thank you very much. So the 7202 will be funded for the next few years. No, the 7202 won't. Apologies. It's a 7201 which will be available and funded for next year. My apologies there. I might have read the question incorrectly. 7202 is a current qualification. The 7201 is a replacement qualification which incorporates more than one trade area. We can't have any single trade qualifications at level 1. They can't be funded. So our 7202 is a single trade. The replacement, the 7201, which just incorporates a new rules of combination, is the funded and available qualification for next year. So 7201. Apologies if I confuse people with that. We seem to have got through all those questions. Apologies it took so long. There were so many questions. We wanted to try to answer them all. I know many have had to move on. If there's any final questions, please put them in now. If not, please contact skillsforwales.customer either at EL or City Guilds or both of us. Put extra questions to us. So is the 7202 funded in Wales next year? No, the 7201 is. Okay, just to be clear, the 7201 is a funded provision next year. Yeah, so please, if we've confused you or we've confused ourselves or there's things we've not answered, please do send your emails in to us and we'll try our very best to come back to you. Just once again, thanks a lot for your attendance. I think it's been a really helpful and useful presentation and webinar. A big thanks to everyone in the panel, particularly Anne Harrod for opening up and supporting us at the start there, and all the hard work by Ian Roberts, who's put the majority of the presentation together and the dates and all the planning. He's worked absolutely tirelessly to produce all this information and support for the providers. So thank you very much to Ian and the rest of the panel, and we look forward to seeing you all very soon on the following webinars and some of the road trips. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon and enjoy your evening, and thank you very much everyone. Take care. Goodbye.